Hi, everyone. Welcome to live stream with me, Dr. Aparajita Jedigunta, or AJ. It is Monday, June 15th, 2020. We are halfway through the year, and where we are halfway through this year is really, really interesting. Um, Especially given today's topic about Wokeness Olympics. But before I get into that, I just want to say, if you are joining in, thank you so much for joining in. Please announce yourself in the comments so I know who you are. Again, my name is AJ, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, strategist, advisor, and also a leadership coach for ambitious working women who want to overcome their self-doubt and imposter syndrome and figure out ways, equitable, sustainable ways to make themselves seen, heard, valued, recognized, and respected as leaders, as visible leaders. So that's a little bit about me. And again, what I want to talk about today is how halfway through the year we are where we are with the SARS-CoV-2 virus or COVID-19 virus, with murder hornets, with unusual weather patterns, and most importantly, with a new movement for justice and equity for Black lives all across the country and all across the United States and all across the world, really. And this is not a moment. And I've said this before, and I want to reiterate it. What is happening in this country right now, what is happening in the United States right now is not a moment. It is a movement. It is a conscious, intentional, overdue movement that is happening in this country precisely because we have ignored the signs for so long that what is happening now is inevitable because we didn't get to equity before, and we've gotten to a situation where we don't get to ignore it anymore. We have to address the disparities, the inequities, the injustices that are happening to Black communities across the nation right now, that have been happening for over 450 years now. But this is sort of when all of this is coming out as almost like this new wave of a civil rights movement, which rightfully that is what it is. And this movement cannot actually happen if we don't include the genocide of indigenous peoples at the inception of America and of immigrants who have joined the conversation later. I'm going to get to all of that in a bit. But what I want to start off with is, in this movement for equity and justice, somehow there has been this internal movement, weird little movement that's happening on and called the Wokeness Olympics, which I just learned this term last week, and my mind was blown. I was like, the what? Apparently, this is really a term, the Wokeness Olympics, because there are entities, people, parties out there who are literally trying to drown each other and everybody else out on trying to be woke because they think what is happening in this country right now with Black Lives Matter is a moment and not a movement. And they're trying to capitalize on it, and they're trying to get themselves to look like the thought leaders on it, when really it is performative allyship. And the thing is, this is not just happening among people who are white, people, Caucasians, people who are white who don't understand the movement. This is happening among other communities too. And I will get to what I think is happening, because I've been thinking about this a lot. And I have a few thoughts on why this is happening, on what exactly is happening, and how that can be reframed to benefit the real movement for Black Lives Matter. But I'm going to get to that in just a bit. I do want to start off with, this is not just happening in the black and white spectrum of the conversation. This is actually happening in other communities as well. For instance, my community, the Indian American community, and I want to use that as an example of what exactly is happening with this Wokeness Olympics. So I have been a part of these conversations for a while now, and it's been interesting for me to be somebody who's been a part of these conversations, to observe how many new groups have sprung up since the murder of George Floyd, calling out for the Black Lives Matter movement and calling out to the truth that, of course, Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter. You thought I was going to say all lives matter there. All Black Lives Matter. And I'm going to say that over and over the course of this. But my point is that it was interesting for me to see how many new groups sprung up and how many people were appalled and just besides themselves and shocked and didn't know better, or said they didn't know better, that they're going to learn now, so on and so forth, since May 25th, 2020. Now, overall, let me take a step back. Overall, since then, I've seen three groups of people. One are people who have already been doing the work for equity, justice, fairness, inclusion, and belongingness, continuing to do their work and really just amplifying their voices. That was one group I saw since the end of May. The second group I saw were people who never talked about equity, inclusion, justice, who were within their own confined little spaces of life, constrained, whether by, whether it was a choice or not. And I respect that. They haven't talked about this. They haven't pretended to have any interest in the greater movement for equity and justice. For them, life has been going on as it did before May 25th, and they have made zero peeps about making statements that they felt would sort of make them a part of this greater movement for equity, justice, and belongingness. What I mean by that is they never spoke about this before. They're not speaking about it even now. They are in their own little, they are in their worlds, and they are continuing in their worlds, and they don't want to step outside of that. And actually, I respect that, because they've made their intentions clear, but they're also staying out of the way. They're also saying, this is not my conversation, but I'm not going to get in the way of anybody else having this conversation. I'm going to completely stay out of this. And by that, they're also kind of saying that whatever happens, they're going to be okay with that. That is the underlying assumption. But at the end of the day, they are not coming in from a place of not knowing and trying to make something of it. So if you are one of those who have always been a part of the movement for equity, justice, inclusion, and belongingness, or if you've been one of those who've never been a part of these conversations and have still chosen to stay out of this, I thank you both, Because on the one hand, those who have always been fighting for inclusion, belongingness, equity, and justice, you are just continuing to do the work. I see you. I hear you. Hey, Ananda, thank you so much for joining. So for those who've always been doing this work, I see you, I hear you, we see you, we hear you. This is a movement. It is not a moment. This is an ultra marathon. It is not a sprint or even a 400-meter dash. And those who have been consistently and continuously doing the work realize that. And I thank you for that. On the flip side, those who have never been involved in these conversations and who have chosen to stay out of it and who have chosen to stay out of the way of those doing the work, I thank you too, because what you are not doing is trying to co-opt this space. What you are doing is saying, this is not my space. Those whose space it is should talk. I'm just not going to get involved. Now, there's a lot to be said about that. I'm not going to get involved. However, in this moment, I do have to thank you because you are not participating in the Wokeness Olympics. So this episode really is about that third group of people who have not been a part of this conversation before, who have not chosen to unpack how this is a movement, how this is an issue of systemic oppression and racism and brutality and discrimination for 450 years. How you've never chosen to be a part of the conversation, yet since May 25th, 2020, you have seen an opportunity of how you can somehow center yourself and your wokeness as a part of this larger movement instead of talking about the movement in itself. You are who I'm talking about in this episode. This is the Wokeness Olympics, because what I'm noticing in my space is how, especially women, because men are actually being a little bit more diplomatic about this, at least in my network. If anybody experiences that, this similar thing or something different, please let me know. Hey, Lindsay, thank you so much for being here. And yes, this is important context. But I feel like what I'm seeing, at least, are people who identify as women who have never been a part of these conversations before, all of a sudden starting to enter into these conversations, but truly making it about themselves and not about the greater conversation as a whole. And I'm seeing this within my community as well. And I'm seeing all of this being framed as, this is what Black Lives Matter needs. I would like a Black Lives Matter leader, or at least a Black leader, to come out and speak on that, not other people assuming that this is what the movement needs. And if you are in a place where you are speaking for the Black Lives Matter movement and saying, this is what they need, this is why we're doing it, this is for their benefit, and they're not actually saying that in your context, you are participating in the Wokeness Olympics, my friend, and you are trying to drown out the voices that actually matter here. Black voices and Black lives, because that's what the movement is. And I've seen this in my community, right? So all of a sudden I saw all of these Facebook groups crop up about South Asians for Black lives and South Asians for this and South Asians for that, and all in the name of the Black Lives Matter movement. And there was so much tone policing happening in that, where everything was framed in terms of, we're not going to let you talk about this because this conversation would be out of the BLM context. And in doing so, they were actually saying that LGBTQIA plus rights, disability rights, the rights of parents with kids who have disabilities, none of those matter because we need to focus on BLM. And I'm sitting there going, you guys do know that There are Black women whose lives matter. There are Black trans women and men whose lives matter. There are Black parents with kids with disabilities whose lives matter. There are Black people with disabilities whose lives matter, right? But the what was happening was apparently all of these intersectionalities meant that we were turning the conversation into an all lives matter context, when really what was happening was that the real intersectionalities of Black lives were getting erased within this group. And on the, and they were also being told, there were also several other groups where you weren't allowed to relate your personal experiences and how your personal experiences relate to your understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement. And then there were other groups where you only were allowed to focus on your personal experiences and not in the greater context. So overall, if you feel like what I'm describing is a hot mess, that's what I experienced. And overall, only thing I saw consistent across all these groups was tone policing, erasure of intersectionalities, and erasure of the real realities of not fighting among ourselves, but really saying, okay, who knows somebody who is a part of the movement who can come and speak to this? That's how we amplify voices, right? Because it's not about me. It's not about South Asians, but it is in the way we relate to the greater movement. Anything that we go through as South Asians in America is a symptom of the larger system of oppression that Black communities across the United States have been subjected to, and they have endured for 450 years and more. So if all you're trying to do is police and drown each other out, then you are playing the Wokeness Olympics. And I'm here to tell you, I am not here for it. Really, that is the bottom line of my message. I am not here for it, because this conversation is not about you. This conversation is about what you are learning about the greater context. So if you want to include your example as a part of that greater context, if you want to talk about what you've learned about Black history, about systemic oppression, about how it can relate to a time in your life where you didn't belong, without any comparison, but just in terms of empathy, an inkling of that empathy, then I think your story is going to be really powerful. And when I say all of this, I'm not shaming or tone policing. I truly am not, because I'm nobody to do that. I have my own baggage. I have my own work. I don't have the energy to tone police or shame anybody else. What I am saying is that I'm inviting you to think about your motives and to think about how you can be more effective for this larger movement of equity, inclusion, justice, belongingness, and a society where all, where all of us can understand the historical context. All of us can understand the systemic oppression that Black communities have been through. All of us can understand the real genocide that Native American communities have been through. All of us can understand the context of immigration that Asian Americans who have come later have been through. All of us can understand the important role that Native Hawaiians and Polynesians play in American history, the important context and historical significance that Latinos and Latinas and the Latinx community play, where we can truly understand the importance of our diversity and the importance of our inclusion and the importance of our equity, belongingness, that's how we're going to create sustainable solutions. So again, I'm not shaming, I'm not policing, I'm not doing any of that. I'm the last person to do that. What I am saying is that this is not a sprint. This is not a moment. It is a movement. So if you are just doing this because you feel panicked that this is this moment that's happening in social media and you have to be a part of it, stop. Please stop. Take a breath and think about how you can be a part of the larger movement. That's what we need solidarity for. If you are just going to join in this in terms of like putting out a couple of posts for like a week or so, and then moving on to the next, whatever 2020 is going to throw at us next week, please rethink that. Please. Because, again, I can't say this enough. This is a movement. It is not a moment. And when we do justice to it, those exact voices that have been oppressed for so long, those exact communities that have gone through 450 years of intergenerational trauma, those exact communities that have thrived and got burned down, those exact communities that have not seen justice. And when I say those exact communities, every single time, I do mean Black communities here. What is your relationship with them? And how can you actually be an ally? How can you actually elevate Black, Indigenous, people of color voices? And those voices include LGBTQIA plus voices, and they include the voices of those with visible and invisible disabilities, challenges, or health concerns. Those are not all separate, because every community has those. The Black community has people who are LGBTQIA plus. Their lives matter as well. They have people with disabilities, visible and invisible. Their lives matter as well. You do not get to discount any of those. You do not get to police any of those and say, if you think about those intersectionalities, you are coming in with an all lives matter perspective. Nope. You don't get to say that. You don't. Because you don't know what work the other person is doing. So if that person is doing real work, you don't get to discourage them. If you are somebody who's not doing that real work and you're just saying these things, I invite you to take a step back and really think about that. You don't have to help. You don't. But don't harm the movement. If you can't be a part of the movement, if you think this is a moment, stay out of it. And I mean that in the best way possible. Support with your money, but you don't have to, don't turn this into the Wokeness Olympics. Don't turn this into, how can I center this around me and gain some business profit from it? How can I center this around me and make this a moment where people, where people see how vulnerable I am and transparent I am and woke I am? No. I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack for this from a lot of people, and that's okay. This is a video I'm going to leave up there because I think this is the truth I'm willing to stand in, that this is a movement, not a moment. There are people who have been doing this work consistently and continuously. and I support them always and 100%. But I will not support these wokeness Olympics where people just try to outdo each other and try to outclamor each other. That is performative. Really? I'm going to give you a week. And then we'll see who's still sticking around. So whether you want to consider this a challenge, an invitation, an insult, which I'm not meaning it as, but if that's how you want to take it, here is my non-apology in the same vein of the non-apologies given by those who say, I am so sorry that you misunderstand me in my heart. Yeah. I'm sorry you took my words the wrong way if this is hurting you. I'll see y'all on Thursday. Bye.